Thank you, Hans. So let's bring the planning board meeting to order. Welcome, everybody, to the March 16, 2023 planning board meeting. We'll do a roll call vote. I'm sorry, roll call, just so that Kate knows who's here. So Rich Baker. Here. Yeah. Pete Sargent. Yeah. Yeah. George Seal. Here. Craig Alexander. Here. And Peter Rushton. So we have sufficient quality. All right. First, under new business, we have applicants Kim and Andrew Dowds. Thank you for showing up tonight. And at 310 Woodland Camp Road, you have an application to rebuild something, no change in use, minimal change in location. So I know we'll have some questions for you, I'm sure. So do you want to take us through what you know about this application?
Okay, very straightforward. He's got a shed next to two buildings side by side. He's just gonna move one a little further back from one shoreline, a little closer to the other, but in all, it's a greater distance from the water. The construction, they're gonna put a concrete slab under it. They're gonna have crushed gravel, strip edge around it. The pad will elevate it a little bit, but apparently not to the existing elevation of the building adjoining it. I did a site visit. The buildings do seem to be connected. There's a couple of 2x4s or rafters going through from one to the other, so they're joined already. Not changing the roof line. So it's basically, he's just gonna rebuild it as it is. It should get 8 inches back.
Thank you for providing the profile drawing.
Side by side? It was, one is a finished building and this one that they're working on is kind of a shed open.
Is that shown in the picture? Is that
It is.
the shed?
That's the one with the bright green on the back.
Yeah, okay.
That's some shed for river construction.
And so it's the shed part that's going to be rebuilt, is that correct?
In the drawings, it's referred to as a garage. Is it a car garage or just a storage building?
Store to keep a tractor in there now, so tractor and some other miscellaneous equipment.
No blower, that type of thing.
Okay.
The essential.
When you look at it.
Yeah, that's it. And inside elevation. But this is one from the back, the walls are gonna be in line.
Hans, a question for you. Is the original you have signed?
Yes, with that signature on the original. And when these are submitted, they don't have payments and there's a lot of stuff that's aren't done yet, because it's just an application that comes in online. So then I transfer the information and catch up with it.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, I had a question. Why do we have a permanent rule? Why is that necessary?
I think it's just to show that they've been to the DEP and gotten the permit.
Because it's going to involve soil disturbance.
Pardon me?
It will involve soil disturbance. I mean, I think they mentioned that in the.
Yeah.
We just
Do the foundation.
thorough.
Yeah.
So that's the case in all, do you have to have it done permit by rule?
He's not altering the shoreline,
Huh?
no, he's not touching the shoreline, so really no.
Oh, or outside the shore.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you still needed a permit by rule with the dirt moving. Because I got a permit by rule on my camp, but I didn't disturb the shore.
Right.
Yeah.
Just if you're within close proximity.
Yeah, which.
But he's not even excavating. He's gonna be adding
Yeah.
the pad.
So restoration.
And with the answer to your question, Pete, I think it's good when we know that people have gone to they're trying to be in full compliance, both with the town regulations as well as state regulations.
Right. So, okay, I haven't had a chance to look at the application, I just got it down, but, so it's within shoreline zone, okay.
Oh,
And,
yes.
and they're gonna, obviously move some soil and stuff like that, so we've issued permits before without a permit by rule, right? And we haven't gotten a permit by rule form signed off by DEP, we just, right?
I think on occasion, not very often, but I think there's been application or two where they.
But normally we don't, so this is uniquely different?
I don't think the project is uniquely different. I think what's unique is they took the.
That's a step.
Yeah, to provide us a copy so that if we ask whether they've got a permit by rule, that we've already known.
Right, but it's not in the shoreline zoning law, our code here in this town.
Oh, no, it's not required that. they-
No, it's not.
Right.
But like, for example, the application we had that we did the site visit, they also provided a copy of their permit by rule application to DEP.
Correct.
In their submittals to us.
All right, that's.
As a matter of
I just wanna
information.
clarify that.
I would say, based on my recollection, Pete, it's almost common that we have some record of submission of an application to DEPs for a permit by rule. I would say that's common. It's not every time, but I would say we've had it more often than not.
In, well, just for the sake of the session here, I think in the past, I've been on the board, what, 2 or 3 years now, 3, 4, I forget. But that is not having a permit by rule, the permit, we've been approved on, they've all, the shoreline zoning, it has not been common. Rather than common. Craig, what do you think?
Something like this we normally don't, but it's just an extra step they took.
I think what is common is it usually commonly comes up in a discussion about whether they have had it gotten a permit by rule. But as far as paper copies, probably not as often as, we'll put it this way, probably less than 50%, we actually see the application or whatever.
Right.
I know we bring it up a lot of times.
Yeah.
Have you gotten a permit by rule when they're down there by the shoreline, excavating for something?
Well, and in some cases, I recall us even advising, and it's probably you, Rich, people that they would be required, not for this permit from us, but just so they don't get themselves into trouble
Okay,
with the state,
all right.
As a public information kind of thing.
But again, it's not a requirement within our shoreline zoning law. Okay, I just want to clarify, thank you.
Peter?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be dense here, but I'm trying to, are you only reconstructing the shed part, not the whole house?
That's correct.
All right.
Just the shed.
When I looked at the application, I was a little confused, because it says rebuild, no change of use, and it's kind of like, on what's being rebuilt.
Yeah.
Just the shed, now I'm gonna call it a garage, it's gonna be it's not very well built right now.
So I don't know how the board feels about it, but I might suggest that a little clarification on the application would help answer that question. Yeah. Could be agreeable to that. So just adding a few words on the application to say what it is you're rebuilding. Never hurts to be clear.
Is that shed thing, is that actually physically attached to the main structure?
Looks like it in the picture.
You have a
Doesn't
question?
have to really do rebuild the add shed after the rebuild.
Yeah. That's it.
One where we're fine.
Yeah, I think so. George, you had a question?
Yeah, so, on the first page, you had, it's the same square footage as the existing structure, 301 square feet. And so that begged the question from something I saw on the last page under the stormwater management that talking about removing the cement pathway, and I assume that's the one just to the lake side of the shed. And adding the square footage to the garage threshold. Could you explain that?
Sure, so there's cement pathway that's going from the north entrance to that camp, which is all concrete. There's no drip at all there, the water just basically runs, hits that off of the roof and then runs down the shore. What I'd like to do is remove that and put sort of like a ramp style threshold into the garage, so basically take that, move it to the garage entrance, and just have gravel there to allow the rainwater to percolate through and not just splash down over the edge. If it's okay to spot that, stay where that is.
And so the ramp would be, I don't want to call it the inland side, but the,
West side,
yeah, the what?
No more.
no, north side.
That's it, yeah, right.
Yeah, so when you're looking at this picture, this is where the cement is now,
Uh-huh,
the east side, and we put it here on the north side.
okay, yeah,
That way you kind of drive
all
into
right.
that, and then
But-
you all curve edge.
The footprint remains
Yes.
the same.
Yeah.
Greg, do you have any questions?
Well, that's pretty cut and dry.
Seems cut and dry. Any other questions?
No,
Are we ready to move on to the findings of fact and conclusions of law? Let us do so, but I need it. So, wait, hang on.
If you wanna go home and watch the news, you probably get back in time for us to get done.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure.
It's down. Saturday. Tomorrow's the voting. You know, is that here or is that at the Senate process?
8. Polls open at 8, close at 8.
You're up for election, right?
Yes. Thank you. Okey dokes. Okay, so these are the Belgrade Planning Board findings of fact and conclusions of law for the application for Kimberly and Andrew Dallas. The address is at 310 Woodland Camp Road, map 31, lot 001. So the applicant, I see your change, that's good. So the applicant on this date applied for a shoreline permit for rebuild shed, no change in use, minor change in location. Thank you for putting that on there. The application was presented to the planning board on today's date. These findings of fact and conclusions of law were developed in conjunction with consideration of the permit application. Okay, so based upon the application materials, testimony, statements, evidence, documents, and other materials submitted to it, and the above findings of fact and conclusions of law were developed in conjunction with consideration of the permit application. So based upon the application materials, testimony, statements, evidence, documents, and other materials submitted to it, the findings of fact, Belgrade Planning Board finds that the project is permitted to rebuild shed, no change in use, minor change in location. under section 14, table 1 in the ordinance, and further makes the following conclusion based on the applicable provision of section 16B of the ordinance. That, number 1, it will maintain safe and healthful conditions. So Rich, you can vote, right?
Yes.
So this is for that it will maintain safe and healthful conditions. So
Yes.
Rich, Pete,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Craig, me too, 5 in favor, none opposed. Number 2, that it will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation to surface waters. By a vote, the board found this statement was met based on the application. So Rich,
It was met.
it was met, yeah. George,
Yes.
and then Craig was me too. Number 3, that it will adequately provide for the disposal of all wastewater. So by a vote, the board found this standard was met. So it's about
Yes.
wastewater. So Rich, yes?
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Craig, me too, 5 in favor and opposed. Yeah, could be. Number 4, that it will not have an adverse impact on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, or other wildlife habitat. By a vote, the board found this standard was met. So this is about spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, and wildlife habitat. Rich?
Yes.
Pete? George?
Yes.
Craig? Me too, 5 in favor, none opposed. That at 5, will conserve shore cover and visual, as well as actual points of access to inland waters. So that by a vote, the board found this standard was met. So Rich?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Me too, 5 in favor, none opposed. That at 6, will protect archaeological and historic resources as designated in the comprehensive plan. By a vote, the board found this standard was met.
Yes.
Rich? Yes. Pete?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Craig? Yeah, me too. Number 7, will avoid problems associated with floodplain development and use. By a vote, the board found this standard was met based on application submissions and public record. So Rich?
Yes.
Pete?
Yeah.
George?
Yep.
Craig? Me too, 5 in favor, none opposed. Now I go through the longer set that most of which doesn't apply, but we'll go through it. Number 8 is in conformance with the provisions of section 15 land use standards, and we'll go through all of these. By a vote, the board found this standard was met based on the evidence in the record and further as follows: that A, minimum lot standards, NA, I'm thinking, or is that a yes?
Either. Both.
Yeah, let's go with yes. This is principal and accessory structures, that's a yes. C, campgrounds.
No.
And A, individual private campsites.
No.
And A. E, commercial and industrial uses. And A. F, parking areas. And A. G, roads and driveways. And A. H, signs. And A. I, stormwater runoff.
Yes.
Yes. J, septic waste disposal systems. And A. And nothing's being proposed for accepting. K, essential services. And A. L, mineral exploration and extraction. And A. M, agriculture. N, timber harvesting and land management roads. And A. Clearing or removal of vegetation for activities other than timber harvesting, none's proposed, right? P, hazard trees, storm damaged trees, and dead tree removal, still nothing proposed. Q, exemptions to clearing and vegetation removal requirements. Exemptions to clearing, is that still in it?
NA.
Because none would be. R, revegetation requirements.
NA.
S, erosion and sedimentation control.
You want to say yes on that one?
Yeah. T, shoreline stabilization. Is that NA, I would say, yeah. U, soils.
That's NA.
Q, water quality.
Yep.
W, historical and archaeological sites.
I don't know.
Sure does look historic.
It's close, it's closing in on. And then X, resource protection, not applicable. And we have standing conditions of approval needed to meet this ordinance in section 16D. So number one, manage stormwater runoff from new or expanded structures in accordance with section 15I of the Belgrade Shoreland zoning ordinance and the main DEP's best management practices as outlined in the conservation practices for homeowners publication. Such measures are to be put in place prior to building use. No, this is a standing condition that applies to all permits unless deemed unnecessary. So I'm thinking that still applies. Does anybody have any rationale to not have it? Okay. Number two, the second one is the planning board's approval of this project is limited to that described in the application and depicted in the accompanying site plan and other application submissions. Any changes to or deviations from the application, site plan, or other application submissions as approved by the planning board must receive prior approval by the board, including but not limited to changes to the proposed location, footprint and height of structures, changes in the number of bedrooms, roads and driveways, parking, wells, subsurface waste disposal systems, the extent and location of vegetated areas, tree cutting and natural vegetation clearing, methods of soil erosion, and stormwater runoff control. This too is a standard condition. Is there any rationale to not include this? I cannot see any. Okay, great. All right, so yeah, let's recap quickly. So the things we're voting on in this one, number 8, have to do with minimum lot standards, principal and accessory structures, stormwater runoff, erosion and sedimentation control, and water quality. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, those 5 things. Are we good? Okay. So based on the above findings of fact, oh wait, let's vote on number 8. So based on those 5 things we just talked about, we're voting that this standard was met, so that this was met. So Rich
Yes.
and Pete,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Craig, me too. So that standard is good. So we've gone through all those standards, talked about the conditions of approval. Now we're on to voting for this one. So based on the above findings of fact and conclusions of law on today's date, the town of Belgrade Planning Board approved by a vote the shoreline application permit application of, and we'll put that in just a second. So let's vote. So this is in favor of this permit application. So Rich.
Yes.
Pete.
Yes.
George.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Me too. 5 in favor, none opposed. Goodbye. With the above conditions and at a meeting on today's date, developed with these written findings of fact and conclusions of law on demand from the Belgrade Board of Appeals and adopted these findings on today's date, 3. But it's gonna be emailed to you, or you could stop by. I'll keep these written things right here so that after they get signed, I'll hand them all back to you. Did you include the word shed on that one? remember we talked about what he's rebuilt, what they are rebuilding.
That's, I used his words verbatim on that.
Okay, so not to be picky, the only thing that's different is this says rebuild shed. This says rebuild.
Is that a shed in it? I'm not sure.
That's why I was just asking about.
Okay, that is. So we can add
Yep.
shed to that.
All I want.
You need to initial or?
One of them.
Rich, wanna sign that?
Andrew or,
So just need for
yeah, have Andrew initial it and date it.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks. Perfect. Yeah, you were good. And thank you for filling out an application that was thorough and complete. That does help. It shows, I mean, there's good information in there. That helps.
Thank you.
All right.
Take good care,
Good
right?
night.
Hope you feel better.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow, we'll catch up.
Yeah.
You and I have to have a long chat. Oh.
Yeah, it's a great time to watch.
He can talk, you can listen.
Yeah,
Excited.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Say anything you want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Although Shane, I think he probably knows at least one sign language.
Yeah, yeah.
One, I'm guessing.
I know that one pretty well.
Yeah.
All right, that checks out that one. So that was it for new business. Other
Actually,
than
we've got LD.
LD 2003, I'm sorry, that was on there. So yeah, you wanna talk about that one?
I don't know, did you have time to review this before you got here?
Yeah.
Because this is kind of just a summary updates. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. It's not expected to pass, I guess, till, is it July or November? You know when it's gonna be?
Well, there's some things that go into effect, or the deadlines are July 1st of this summer.
Yeah. So basically conforming lots, they're saying are gonna have double the amount of dwellings allowable. Key for us is shoreline zone supersedes all this. Non-conforming lots, you know, are non-conforming lots. Not included in there. That's about it. So some people, I guess our minimum lot size ordinance now says every dwelling must have, every lot must have square footage to accommodate individual dwellings. So we've got some 2-acre lots that have 2 dwellings on them. So my question is, how is that gonna follow to after this? If we allow, let's just say in a 2-acre lot, 80,000 square feet is required, 2 dwelling structures, one of which can be a duplex. So if they're effectively saying we're gonna double that, then 2 duplexes, what does it mean for us?
Well, that was very helpful that you got this information, you know, from MMA and passed it on to us, because I tried to look at the statute and I can't make heads or tails out of it, but I mean, there's a lot here, and you know, I think the first question is, what ordinances do we have to change, and how do we have to change them to be in compliance with this new law? I mean, we can't be issuing permits that violate our current ordinances. And necessarily, at least I don't think we can, even if, and the, I mean, like you said, as Hans said, shoreline zoning clearly is not impacted by this. So that's the good news. The bad news is, I think the multifamily dwelling ordinance and minimum lot size ordinances probably definitely are, and maybe the subdivision ordinance. And, you know, as I said, there's a couple of things in here where they're deadlines. I think that are totally ridiculous of July 1st, because a lot of this terminology hasn't even been defined yet. And the state, the Department of Economic and Community Development is supposed to do rulemaking. I meant to look at their website to see if there was anything about that, you know, progress report, but or a timeline or something of that nature. But there's all kinds of conflicting terminology used in here that MMA points out, or that's at least unclear, you know, like accessory dwelling unit, an additional dwelling unit, and density requirement, depending on how that's interpreted. And they're also supposed to come up with funding to help towns adapt to this new law. And my take, frankly, is not to do a damn thing until they come up with that funding and they finish their rulemaking. You know, let them do their job first, so that we don't take some false steps. My guess, I mean, I've been in this situation myself, as probably you have, Rich, where, and maybe even you, Peter, where, you know, a law is passed and it took longer to do the rules than it did the legislation.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, writing legislation is the easy part, implementing is the hard part. And so I think we should, you know, revisit this. I don't know how we'll know when the state's completed its rulemaking and answered some of these questions, but I don't think we should be rushing into any changes to ordinances or changes in how we issue permits at this point myself. That's my take on it.
I wanted to, and Lorna wanted to make this available to everybody.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful. I mean, it makes this analysis by MMA is far better than every town in the state bumbling around, trying to figure out what that law means.
Right.
Yeah.
Hans, I had a question for you. Did I read somewhere about this being applicable to communities of 10,000 people or more, or is that something else?
Not sure about that yet, because
Okay.
now it's, you know, like it says in the takeaways, density requirement is not defined, so that might still be hanging out there. And this
Okay.
might be something for people that some communities want to add
Sure.
more houses. You know, if they got 2 acre or 5 acre zoning and they say, all right, well, we can
Right.
double it now, increase our revenues without going through ordinance change.
And I can clearly see that in some communities, not Belgrade, where infrastructure is impacted, we don't have infrastructure. Like others would, you know, water and sewer, I mean, this would have a huge impact to those infrastructure requirements. And I can see that being problematic for those.
Although the impact here that I'm concerned about is on private drinking water supply wells. When you double the amount of residences and septic systems on the same lot size. And, you know, in places like, I mean, they refer to growth areas. Well, one of the growth areas is Belgrade Lakes Village. How's that gonna work? I mean, the groundwater there is all contaminated from septic systems as it is on that peninsula, and gasoline.
And most of it's in shoreline, though.
Huh?
Most of it's shoreline.
Well, that's true, and that'd be a plus.
That's a saving grace.
That's a saving grace there. That's a good point.
It's not all, but most of it.
Most of it is, yeah, no, that's right. So. Anyway, that's my concern, is the impact on wastewater disposal
Yes.
systems and groundwater. and drinking water supplies as a consequence.
Mhm.
I mean, because this, it seems to indicate that, you know, this law doesn't care if you have like a 40,000 square foot minimum lot size like Belgrade.
No, it doesn't.
It's based on the state minimum, which is half of that.
And, you know, page 5, it says lots without existing dwellings. A municipality must allow structures with up to 2 dwelling units per lot.
Provided that-
Structures with 2 dwelling units, to me, that says duplex.
Or 2 houses.
Yeah, or 2 houses,
No, well,
or
allow structures with up to 2 dwelling units
per lot.
per lot.
Provided that lot does not contain an existing dwelling unit, so it's totally from raw.
But then go down to the next one with the existing one, it also allows 2. So you can end up with 3.
I mean, it just seems to me this law was, the focus of it was, you know, Falmouth, Cape Elizabeth, Scarborough, you know, towns like that. And some of the, you know, and it's sort of one shoe size fits all, and how well it applies to, you know, towns that are more rural in nature and don't have, you know, public sewer and water.
Peter, you mentioned the 10,000. I kind of remember seeing that somewhere too. Is the question, your question was, would it not apply to towns with less than 10,000 people?
That's where I was curious if like there's that threshold, like if you're less than 10,000 people, does it even apply?
Yeah,
I don't remember reading anything in here to that
I
effect.
didn't either.
And maybe I'm confused with another thing another LD that I was reading. That's very possible.
I'm not sure where I saw that either, but this law, George, is it fairly lengthy, or is it, when you say you really couldn't make heads or tails of it, I assume it's not 2 pages long or whatever.
No, I don't remember how long it is, but it's not a short bill
And
or law at this
and in
point.
your recollection, there's nothing in there that says something, like in the shoreline zoning law, there were times when pieces of legislation went into effect regardless of what the ordinance said, but it said things like notwithstanding any provision in a local ordinance to the contrary.
I actually don't know the answer to that question, Rich, because I read that before I read this, and I got more out of this. And so, you know, those July 1st deadlines, I mean, you know, I suppose a good argument could be made that we have to implement those deadlines regardless of whether we have the ordinances changes in place or not, because state law does supersede town ordinances. But I wouldn't know what to do or how to do it.
I think that we have a minimum lot size ordinance helps us. You know, we're not starting from 0.
Right.
So, I mean, it might protect us.
Yeah. And it's possible that, like George was mentioning, is maybe one or maybe a second other ordinance that would have to be revisited and edited.
You know, I think we should, you know, put this on the agenda at some point, you know, again, in a couple of months to see what's changed and what progress has been made by the state. It's interesting, the advice in here from, I don't remember what page it's on, MMA's attorneys, is that, you know, that we have a discussion just like this and on the public record. And clearly, they don't as much say it, but clearly what, you know, I'm guessing that advice is based on is to show good faith effort in terms of just not ignoring the law. And as a sort of defensive mechanism. I have a hard time believing that. I don't even know who, I assume it'd be the Department of Economic and Community Development that would enforce this law, maybe with state housing, I'm not sure. But neither of those agencies are enforcement agencies.
Right.
They don't have any enforcement arms now, unlike, you know, say Inland Fish and Wildlife or DEP or agriculture or whatever.
Well, you know, from a practical perspective, this has not passed yet, right?
Oh, yeah, no, this is law.
This is
This
law.
was passed last session.
Oh,
a year
last
ago.
session. Oh, yeah, in April 27, 22. Okay, I was thinking 23, I'm sorry. So from a practical perspective, we should be looking at revisiting this. Late April, May, something, I
Yeah,
don't know.
or June, early June, first meeting in June or something.
We're looking-
Well, I mean, we've got copies, so
Yeah,
go through with a highlighter,
yeah,
find points of interest that we can discuss next time.
funding would be one.
Yeah, well, and. I mean, I kind of did what you just suggested, admittedly, I probably could go over it a couple more times and get more out of it, but, you know, one of my thoughts was, and this has to do with the state funding, I don't think the ordinance changes that, maybe I'll be wrong about this, but the ordinance changes, that might be required to be in compliance with this law. I kind of feel, at least on first brush, it might be above our, abilities as lay people to actually come up with. And particularly if it remains as unclear and kind of conflicting terminology as this seems to imply. And so, it's only appropriate that this not become a state unfunded state mandate on municipalities, which is illegal under the state constitution. And so, waiting for funding from the state to say for hire KV Cog or somebody like that to help us wade through this seems to me not an irresponsible thing to do.
Thanks.
Because this is, it's very fuzzy in that they're calling these accessory dwelling units. They must be allowed on lots, but it doesn't speak to ownership. If they're private, on one lot, or like you said, address the subdivision law.
Right.
So I guess I need to pull out the big thick copy and see what definitions has for accessory dwelling units and so forth. But that's the kind of stuff we need to navigate.
It's interesting reading. I don't even draw, I'm just looking at it now. There's like density projections and all this other stuff that's thrown in there.
Right.
And that if towns have too much density, they can adopt other ordinances that limit and everything else, but it's just.
Yeah, and some of the towns like in the Portland, the suburbs of Portland have specific ordinances that specify projected, or sort of density goals, and obviously we don't. But MMA points out that since that's not defined, it could be interpreted depending, the state could interpret it to mean if you have a minimum lot size ordinance, that de facto determines your development density. And is that what, does that get caught up in that? That's sort of one of my, when I said earlier that, this seems to be a one size fits all kind of approach. That, I don't know, there's a lot here, and there's a number of places, if you read this, where MMA recommends sitting down with the town attorney and asking for advice on how to proceed.
Yeah.
Well, that's a cost to the town.
It is. Yeah, it's another expense, that is not really captured in any other place. It's like, oh, here's a new thing to do, right? And suck it up, buttercup, you gotta talk to your lawyer to go do some stuff.
I mean, in a kind of mandate like this, to use shoreline zoning as an example. When that was rolled out, it was the state planning office at the time rather than DEP, but there was a model ordinance as guidance to towns as to what was at a minimum required. Well, it seems to me, hopefully that's what DECD's regulations will either be accompanied by, or they'll be written in such a manner that it provides that guidance to, smaller municipalities that don't have a town planner and don't have, an attorney sitting at the planning board meetings.
Mhm.
And I doubt that would be ready by July.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Timeframe.
I'm sure, yeah. So let's revisit, maybe early June, let's put a plug in to put it on the first agenda item in June. How about that?
Yeah,
I think,
not a concern of yours, is it?
well,
no, I'll make a request.
don't count your chickens.
I know, right. Do not. And so.
That's a fun, you just punted it down the road. Piece of minutes. Taylor just said.
Thank you,
Good to go.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, before we go to the minutes, shall we go to the planning board charter review? And so, thank you also for supplying this to review. So, so for everybody's awareness, I know that, so the town manager was made aware of this effort, right, through email. Then George and myself met with the town manager, with Lorna, to give her some context and some understanding as to what's going on with it. I know she was gonna review it. She had a question about one word in particular, George, and I think, but otherwise, I think conceptually it was quite agreeable, and so I don't know. What else should we talk about with this? I know we have some timeline to talk about. We need to talk about
Yeah.
getting in front of the town's attorney, speaking about the attorney.
I think that would be of interest to everybody because the timeline's faster than you or I thought.
True. So initially, when we were talking about this, planning board ordinance, I know in my mind, I was thinking we'd be thinking about bringing it to the voters in November. I think we mentioned that in the last meeting. But when we met with Lorna, she felt that if this goes according to what she thinks would be fairly straightforward business with the town's attorney, that we could shoot for a June referendum. Because there will be one. So that changes the timeline rather than to do a November ballot, it's a June one. So I guess I would want to make sure if the planning board objects or sees this as not realistic, we should probably understand what that is and bring those things to her. But otherwise, I just wanted to bring that up now. So I don't know, how do you guys feel?
We'd have to hold a public meeting, public hearing, I think, on the evidence.
Correct.
The select board would,
Right, select
yeah,
board,
would.
yeah, they would hold a hearing.
On this and I mean, the reason there's gonna be a voting day in June is I can't quite remember what the issue is, but there's something already queued up for that. That's apparently fairly important, has something to do with contracts, town contracts.
I certainly personally don't have any problem with moving it to June as long as there's time frame for the select board to have their hearing and the office there to do the work that's necessary. I think we pretty much got our language straight and we're happy with it.
Right. So I know that we want to get it to Bill Saucier, right? To review and see if he had any issues with it or advice about changes or whatever. And then also get it in front of the select board and also have time to hold the public hearing and then also have time to make it prior to the June thing. So you have what is it called? Printing the warrant article, or how's that phrased? There's some time that's needed between time you vote on it and it has to be printed. Whatever that's called,
Yeah. Well, it's-
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know.
So there are
I can't
several-
come up with the terminology.
There are several milestones, and I think we've covered, kind of know what they are. They're just more compressed than I was thinking originally.
When we met with Warner yesterday, she went through all those steps, so she clearly has already thought this through. On, you know, what happened, and, so she was talking about not having this on the agenda for the select board meeting next Tuesday, but the meeting after that.
Right. April.
And felt that if, you know, depending on how that went, then this could go to the town attorney and he would probably review it in less than a week.
Right.
Or she would ask him to review it in less than a week. And since he's already commented on, when we submitted that memo to him, one of the questions we asked him is, what do you think of the MMA model ordinance? And he thought it was perfectly fine. Well, so this is essentially the MMA model ordinance, or the two model ordinances smushed together a little bit. So hopefully anything he comes up with that might require changes would be minimal.
So at this point, you know, it's a little bit quicker timeline, but, based on the discussion we had with Lorna, really no objections. There was one word she cringed a little bit about, had questions about. But then those other steps, getting to the town's attorney, getting a quick turnaround, getting it in front of the select board, those things. She felt pretty confident we could meet the milestones that would allow us to get it for the voters in June.
Yeah. And the other thought I had is, if the timeline did work out, it's one of the things where, in my mind, this is not an emergency. If it had to go November because time didn't work out, so be it.
Right.
So if we make it in time frame, great.
Right,
Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, that was our expectation, I mean, so.
Right.
Not knowing that there was something else afoot.
all right, so anything else we need to do with regard to the planning board charter review?
No, the only thing obviously is that, you know, when it goes to the select board, one or more of us will need to attend.
Can I ask one question? That's one of the reasons I came.
Sure.
About it. I was just curious, when the associate member. It says when a little, what you say? A associate member may attend all meetings of the board. He or she may ask questions or offer comments only when members of the public are allowed to do so. They may make good and second motions to vote, you know, when they're designated by the chairperson. Why, I mean, if like Rick shows up as an associate and, you know, he's been an associate for however many years, his opinion wouldn't matter if there's a quorum of regular people, even though he wouldn't be able to vote, let's say. But if he determines something might be inappropriate or whatever, you know, he's not really allowed to interject, knowing that you guys always usually let the public speak. But if not, then his opinion or the associate's opinion doesn't really matter.
I saw that too, Shane, and I'm just using for my 2 cents, and the way I interpret it, because it struck odd with me. And I thought about it, and the only time we have meetings where the public is not allowed to speak is when it's actually a hearing. You know, if we have a butters here, we're having a hearing about a property, well then we ask for comments at a specific time. But I'm with Shane, you know, a little clarification might help. Because we are public, it is a
I
public,
mean,
meeting, public
and
welcome to
The
speak.
reason I ask is because I am contemplating getting on this board. And I have opinions of what, you know, how I read the ordinance, how I look at it, or I see or interpret. But if I'm gonna sit in the chair and my opinion's not gonna matter, I'm not gonna be able to voice my opinion, whoever that associate person is. I understand why they're here to vote when you don't have the regular board, but I think they should, in my opinion, should be able to voice their opinion or their comments or their views. That gives you guys, the regular board members, something to think about. that maybe you might not have thought about. Whether they vote or not is the big thing. They don't need to vote because there's already a quorum here, but what their views are, as being a board member, I think they should be listened to.
We did bring that up, or I brought it up last time, and my concern or thought was, what if nobody's here to speak, in the public? Does that mean I can't say anything? Or is it only where the public is prohibited to talk? And it kind of came to the conclusion of the only, some meeting where the public could not, or cannot speak. And I don't know when that would be.
Yeah, that's how I thought that's what it meant, was when the public is precluded from having an input, and even under the circumstance under the commercial development review ordinance, there may be a certain order in which the public, the applicant, if public, can get to speak, but they still have an opportunity to speak. The only thing I could think of would be if we ever had something similar to an executive session,
That's, I was gonna say.
and I don't know that we even can do that.
It's a good question.
You know, it's not like we deal with personnel matters or something like that, that under, you know, law can be dealt with in executive session. I don't even, so it's awkward language, I agree.
Did you mention, I'm sorry to interrupt, did you mention in the last meeting, like Reed Field, they have executive session? The Reed Field Planning Board, or somebody, some other municipality had like executive sessions? And you made a statement to, you know, something like, why would we ever have those?
Oh, you know what? I know. Yeah, Reed Field, I don't know, even remember now why I was at on the Reed Field website, but they apparently there was a lawsuit and they went into executive session with their attorney. And that's a whole different kettle of fish. That's different.
Well, that was just my thought when I started reading. it. I was
Yeah.
thinking, if you guys ever got together as a group, so say you had a powwow, an executive meeting, where you wanted to throw, you know, how would we handle this situation? Which would be something I would think would be normal, rather than it just being handed to you the day of the meeting. You know, you could have a what if Woodland Campground Association got bought out by one person, and they wanted to develop it. And here comes this guy, how's that gonna get handled? That's something, if you guys had an executive session, where you could throw those scenarios out there. So that you'd have an idea of, you know, tearing into the ordinance and reading and determining how something like that would be handled.
Yeah.
In that case, the associate, his opinion, we wouldn't be able to say anything. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
It's not me trying to just stir up a nest, it's just a matter of why you're limiting that associate's ability to do something other than the vote. I can understand it.
So I hear what you're saying on this, and when I read this, I saw the word only, right, and I was thinking, ooh, does that limit something?
Right.
And so, and then I reread it, it said, she may ask questions or offer comments only when members of the public are allowed to do so. So if we just hold it right there, I'm thinking, the practical nature of the way we conduct business so far, public is allowed.
Right.
Right, so therefore the associate would be allowed, you know, to comment. So I cannot think of a time when we have not allowed any comments.
Well, then why even write it in the first place?
Well, I think
If you're gonna do it, then just even write it in there. So don't give any
the only,
vagueness of whatever, just know that you could write in there that the associate doesn't get to vote if there's a quorum of regular board members. That's it.
yeah, I hear you on that. The only reason one reason to keep it in there would be if there are times there is executive session. I've never used it. Has anybody ever used an executive session?
Not since I've been on the board.
But just because we haven't done it doesn't mean it can't be done in the future.
I
So
know,
it might be good reason to.
we had executive session one time when, at the, appeals board level.
You did?
Yeah, it was. And,
with the town attorney, was that?
I don't know, I wasn't there.
Oh,
None of the appeals board knew about it until after the fact.
Oh,
So that was,
It just seems to me, I mean, and again, it's your guys' thing, but it just seems to me like it's a limiting factor. Or if you're not meaning to limit anything on them, other than the ability to vote when you've got a quorum, then you shouldn't give the impression of any limiting thing, because something might happen down the road, and now that person, that associate person is limited. Just a point.
so are you suggesting just delete the word only, or?
Just anything that even discusses about him not being able to comment unless the public can, you delete all that. You just have, you rewrite it to the point where, you know, the associate member doesn't get a vote unless needed or called upon by the chairman, or however it goes. But I just believe if you got two associate members here, you get everybody showing up and you're reviewing, let's say, a complicated application.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. As a practical matter, that's gonna continue to always be the case.
Right.
Except in, you know, like the rarity of an executive session, because that's the only time, even with a select board, that the public, you know, isn't a part of that meeting.
Yeah, on my level, I don't foresee anything other than if there were an executive session, some meeting we have where the public can't speak. Planning board meeting.
Well, and, you know, let's, just for the sake of argument, say in the future, some planning board decides, well, we don't want to hear from the public. Well, they're gonna get the town in a world of legal hurt that way, because that would be illegal.
I mean, would there ever be an occasion like the development of the old Boy Scout camp? When whoever buys that, and they sit down here and they come with their mega plan of 50 houses and 18 boat slips and whatever they're gonna do to develop that piece of property. That's gonna be, and it's not a commercial piece of property, it's, you know, residential. That's gonna, incur more than one meeting to develop it, you know. Me, if I was one of you boys, I'd be like, boy, how are we gonna handle that? How do you look at that? How do you do that? So it might be a time when you guys sit together and say, hey, well, let's have an executive time and just talk about, you know, or even they're all hypothetical. You know, there's hypothetical situations that 30 years down the road might happen. And development issues or whatever. Well, how would you do that? Those
Yeah,
are things you would discuss amongst yourselves rather than,
we can't do that except in a public forum.
or an executive.
No,
session.
can't do it in an executive session. It would be against state law.
Or whatever, I'm just
I guess.
throwing it out there.
It's another executive session.
We'd have to hand out cigars too.
At the, I think it was at the. It was at the following, in regards to a planning board meeting. I heard, I did see the documentation on this years ago. Over on Horse Point Road, the interesting subject matters over there.
I don't want to, I just wanted to make that point, and whatever you guys do with it. But it's something that's not set in stone yet, but that's just a public's opinion of limiting the associate position.
I mean, this doesn't address executive sessions, I think because, you know, that's dealt with in state law. Yeah, I don't know how to reword that, without doing quite a bit of drafting, I guess.
You definitely need to get the town attorney involved.
Well, and that's certainly the plan,
Well, as far as that aspect, the only thing you need to rewrite, in my opinion, would be take that limitation out of on the public. Just don't even mention that. Just say that the associate, you know, the associate position doesn't need to vote if a regular quorum is there or called upon by the chairperson.
yeah, but you want to make sure that you don't create a situation where, let's say we have a chairperson in the future who pretty dogmatic or whatever and doesn't want to hear from the associate. You want to have something in here that is clear about, when the associate has, can ask questions, when can make comments, even if they don't have
Well, then good luck filling that position.
a vote, so. It cuts both ways.
I don't see this kind of both ways. That person's doing the same job you are.
Yeah, no, I agree, don't misunderstand, I'm just.
Like, no, I'm not putting myself or I'm putting anybody there. I'm just the person who's arguing for the person that's gonna sit over there. And whatever, if your opinion matters one night, and then it doesn't matter the next, that doesn't really make sense. Your opinion either matters or not. You're right to vote or not because there's a quorum. I understand that, because you only need to have X amount. But tell a guy to show up to a meeting, oh, I don't need your opinion. And I'm not saying it because the public's hearing 99.9% of the time, you're gonna be allowed. But it's just not wording that at all. It takes the whole. Don't mean to argue, just making points. You guys can get what that's at.
Well, at this point in the process, I suppose that, if the whole board wanted to eliminate that part of that one sentence, what we could do is, suggest that to the select board. When it's presented there, because.
We should find out first of all whether we could even do anything like that.
You want to
I've
go?
never even heard of anything like that going into planning boards all public.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So can we have a private meeting?
The only
Because
circumstance,
every time there's more than three of us.
yeah, we have to,
post it.
Exactly.
yeah, right,
You-
go out on a site or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to put it, because that's the way I've been thinking about it for 20 years. Everything's supposed to be public.
Yeah. So I don't think it's an issue, but.
Yeah.
The actual part of that paragraph that I thought was somewhat more weird than the issue of the speaking when the public can speak is it says associate member may attend all meetings. And I was wondering, does that mean that, you got supposedly some provisions here where you attend 3/4 of the meetings or you get kicked out or whatever. Looks like the language is associate member, looks like he can attend when or if he ever wants to. It's almost like he's being invited, not being invited, he's allowed to come, but don't feel you have to.
Unless called upon.
Yeah.
Where it says in there, by the chairman. Just. Move it on.
Yeah, it would be good to find out if there's even such a thing as executive session for the planning board.
It's gonna go to the attorney, so pose that as a question, ask for clarification.
Yeah. Or the select board may ask that or something. Somebody will ask that.
Georgia, like the large farm.
It is good. It helps you read, right? Me. I know. I changed the size of my curtain to something larger today, because I'm like, oh man, I gotta see it.
Yeah, I started going 14 on everything.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Absolutely, Shane. Any other comments? Questions, concerns? If not, I think we can still proceed as we've talked about recently. And just to make sure to say it, when we met with Lorna, we talked about the history and provided how some things were in conflict, which results in the need for this. So there was the discussion of the law and that which was repealed, and then the thing called the charter. So it's like, all good intentions, but it was just kind of unusual.
Just a kind of semi-comical side note. So apparently Lorna and Mary Vogel they tried to find the signed version of that 1991 charter that was presumably approved by the select board. They can't find it. You know, as back when I was dealing with Mary, she said, "Oh, I know it. It's probably around here somewhere." Apparently not. So they couldn't find it. So it's almost like Warner was acting like, you know, it may have never been signed or approved. It was just drafted. Nobody knows. Doesn't matter,
But actually, it's good food for thought going forward, because records management is just so important, you know. I know it's not a sexy topic. You know,
yeah, I know, but
It's
when you can't
so important.
determine if something's been approved.
Yep. Alrighty, are we okay on the planning board charter review? If so, let's move on to the reviewing the and perhaps approve the previous minutes. We have two sets, is that correct? Right?
I think one of them has been voted on already.
Okay, so the meeting minutes of 2/16 have been approved, is that correct?
Yeah, they just printed when I printed the other.
Okay, no problem. So the only ones we have to do are from March 2. Everybody have them? Okay.
I mean, but they've been revised if you want to look at them and make sure the revisions are correct.
Hans, are you saying that on the 2/16 have been revised?
Yeah, these are the revised.
Yep, okay, got you.
Which one's good? 216 is out?
Right. Yes, that's out.
Good. Thank you.
We're on to 3/2, March 2.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so review. Are we through the meeting minutes? Yeah. What edits or comments are needed on this?
I've got a couple.
Okay.
Under call to order, it says that, meeting on March 3rd, it's actually March 2nd. The first line of the second line of the first paragraph is.
Yep.
March 3rd, so.
Yep.
And Adam Gardner was here, he wasn't online.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
that's right.
And
So he needs to be added to the in-person list and
yes, yes. I just have a typo on the second page, third line from the bottom. So the board cannot approve a permit on and get rid of the D.
So change AND to AN,
Yep.
got you.
And well, I had a little bit, the next sentence, the applicant will need to amend the proposed site plan. I wanted to just, the applicant amended the proposed site plan. No big deal one way or another.
Thank you, Rich. Anything else? Pete, anything?
Just the discussion part down on the first page.
Okay, what do you
The
think?
paragraph is. We could spend some time there, kind of rephrasing it more professional way. If you want to do that or not, then we could kind of refer. Yeah, it's gonna take some time. That's all, just,
I would say, at this point, it's up to you. If you feel strongly that you'd like to see some changes, then let's try some.
I really don't, I want to point out to the board.
Sure.
I don't really want to take the time to do it, but the what's being said is. If the idea is correct, like you may want to talk about that principal structure rather than the camp and stuff like that.
Gotcha. So would you feel comfortable if rather than amending these minutes, that going forward, we try to capture those words in that same way that you're talking about? So referencing primary structure rather
And
than
that's gonna kind of follow along with
the ordinance.
the ordinance, and also, another good document. Is, the main shoreline zoning handbook for shoreline owners, what's given out to the public, they kind of summarize a lot of stuff in here, kind of use the terminology. It might be helpful, I guess, if the note taker that the young lady we have worked for, if she had a copy of this, so when she starts putting it together.
So keep in mind, she's taking this from our discussion, so if we're using the words camp and bunkhouse. She's not gonna assume
Right.
primary structure, secondary structure. She's gonna type it the way we said it.
and then it should be
Okay.
us that are start using that
Yeah,
terminology.
All right.
We maybe should read that.
Yeah.
And
Good point.
be familiar with the terminology in there.
You wanna go through it a little bit? Or you wanna do it now? What do you wanna do?
That.
Well, maybe, yeah, the content is correct, but just the wording is.
The word is probably the way we set up those.
Yeah, okay, that's what we said.
But I think it's a good point though, going forward.
Mine.
Yeah, so that way, in future meeting minutes, we reference these things and more in line with what the ordinance and that publication says.
Yeah, and we don't, it's, you can do it one or two ways, or both, like referencing the handbook, which is kind of a summary, or we could reference, and this, or reference, right, what wording is in the shoreline, our shoreline zoning law.
Gotcha. Right, good point, thank you. I had one, if you had nothing else, you'd add one thing. So Shane's name is under the in-person attendees. I believe Mr. Chapu's name is spelled CHAPUT rather than two P. So strike one P. That's it for me.
My name on
Yeah,
page 3.
I caught that. Take it to capitalize. T on the first sentence. Mr. Alexander, you can know Mr. Alexander. You're first.
Isn't that how the Romans used to spell?
Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, just two items. Under call to order online attendees. So Jeff Allen is from AE Hodgson. And James Beasley is not, so just that clarification. And then again, sort of along the lines of Pete's comment under the discussion, page 1 and 2 of the that first shoreline zoning application. Does anybody recall, didn't we mention in passing that we did a site visit?
I assume we did.
I thought you did, Peter, but
I thought I did too, now that you mention it, and it was quite obvious because we didn't do this.
right, and you know, my notes are part of the public record, but I was thinking that there should be a sentence in here that said that the board conducted a site visit on, I don't remember what the date was, but
Yeah. Yeah, it might have been
It was
the 25th,
Saturday before. I know it was Saturday.
25th of January.
Greg was just supposed to be out fishing that day, I think.
yeah, what day was that, right?
It was the 25th.
25th, yeah,
So,
thank you, yeah.
Yeah, it was on Saturday, yeah, just before the snowstorm.
so maybe after that first paragraph, just a sentence as a new paragraph, the board conducted a site visit on that day,
28th.
on, yeah, February 28th.
No, it was
Oh, February.
25th.
No, it was January. Well, hang on, no,
No, it was
February
February 28th.
25th,
Oh, 25th, okay, February 25th,
Have it on my calendar.
yeah.
February 25th, we just to repeat, February 25th.
Okay, thank you. Gotcha. Anything else, George?
No, that's it.
Craig, anything else?
Can I go back one?
Yep.
I don't know whether it's worth mentioning in the discussion, but it said to tear down existing structure, replace them with a new camp and bunkhouse. Is it worth saying that an existing shed is also proposed to be moved back further from the water? Remember that?
On the way in the back?
Yeah, the one in the back was supposed to be going outside the setback.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's on the application, so I don't know whether we need to put it in there, but it would clarify
Yeah,
that the shed is being moved as
I
part
think
of.
that would be worthwhile.
Yes, I think so too. It is a important but small point, because at one time, there was question of what did that do to the square footage of the area?
Let's just say an existing non-conforming shed is being moved beyond outside the setback area or whatever.
Oh, beyond the 25 feet.
No, beyond, it's beyond the 100-foot setback.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, back. I guess they have that, beyond 100 feet, okay.
Yeah. Beyond the 100-foot setback.
So for Caitlin's benefit, so after bunkhouse on that third line, Rich, that's where that sentence would go.
Yeah,
And that sentence would read, a non-conforming shed.
is being moved to meet the setback. Being moved beyond the setback requirement distance.
It's beyond the 100-foot setback.
Yeah, beyond the 100
Is beyond the 100-foot setback.
Yep.
Okay, got you. Thank you, Kate. I hope you got that. Thanks. Okay, great. All right, anything else? Anybody? So we have made some amendments. So we revised this or suggested to revise this. So if this all goes according to plan, and if Katie can get what we've said and rummaged around on our conversation. So I entertain some notes for her. Thank you. Thank you. I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended for March 2nd, 2023.
Thank you. And second, any more discussion? No. Thank you. Also, we'll do a vote, so. Yeah. So, Rich,
Yes.
yes, Pete,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Craig, me too, 5 in favor, none opposed.
I kind of looked at it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was-
I was making sure that people that were voting were there, so I was like, okay, yeah, we're. All right, Hans, what do you got for CEO updates?
Oh, Lord.
Won't you buy me?
Oh, that's gonna be good.
That was quick.
Yeah.
Well, we discussed your email, about commercial property. I did shoot out some notice of violations to the property owner and to the contractor. After the discussion I did have with them. They did knowingly and willingly proceed with site prep from clearing of the timber. And they did so without erosion control. So I should stop order. With the exception of implementing erosion control and remove all equipment from the site. Which they did.
Where's this?
The place that you asked about, on Highway 27, next to
Ron's old,
Bellavance.
Oh, okay, yeah.
and because you said there's a new owner,
There's a new one.
So it's not wrong, but yes.
is that,
To be
that
clear,
property?
just to be
that-
clear.
Right.
It's like the old Smith farm, right?
We don't want any confusion.
Right.
But he does not own it anymore, right? To be clear.
So fines were also administered to both in the amount of $2,500.
Okay. May I ask who the owner is?
Brad. Frederickson.
Okay.
You got the last name for that.
Okay. Thanks for doing that.
So,
Go ahead.
well, so that's still a commercial site, so it's still approved for whatever Ronnie. I don't know, what's the permit say that Ron had, what's that approved for?
What I saw was like they had this, it was strip malls, there was retail, storage, there was several things, I think 5 or 6 criteria that it was approved for, but they were all very small square footage. It looked like they were gonna have 2 strip buildings. Am I correct?
I don't know, I'm asking.
Was that Bellavance permit or what they plan to do?
I think it was what they
Bellavance.
planned.
What because Bellavance came in for the first,
He got a permit for storage of equipment, I think. It was supposed to be his site.
was that just there? Because that's still valid,
Yeah,
because he did do that.
I don't know for sure, but I thought it was like storage of his equipment. It was as his kind of operating facility, where he had
Or
operated.
was there anything else involved with it?
I'd have to see the,
Wasn't their office space?
I think there was more involved than
Was
just
it?
that, yeah,
Uh,
because they had put up a sign saying future home of such and such storage.
There was a sign, future home of something storage, but
Yeah,
my recollection when I saw that sign was, because I don't remember it being part of the application process. I just remember, and I may be wrong, but I kind of remember it was just, he was gonna operate from that site with his equipment and stuff. I don't recall it had anything to do with that.
Whatever permit may have been granted would have been expired by now anyhow, right?
no, because he's been doing it. Unless it's for something that he hasn't been doing. But he has been storing material there, he has been storing block in there, he has been storing his equipment there. So that, he did put the trees in the front.
Yeah.
That's all valid, that validates that permit.
Have you seen what they do?
Yes, I drive by it every day, 4 or 5
That
times.
was more than,
I
they
know,
were
but
improving the site,
yes,
and they
but
didn't come with a plan.
do you know what the site was approved for? You don't,
Not specifically, no, I don't.
well, we need to know that before we start and no fines and stuff.
The plan I saw, anyways, we'll discuss it. When they come for an application. I mean, how long is the permit valid?
What I'm saying is valid because he's already been using it, so it's already established, so there's no taking it away.
So when did you want, to go in there, about 5, 6 years ago, I think?
You can't, once the property's established with a permit, it's established, there's no taking it away, just because he stops using it. It was already established.
I agree with Craig, except to the extent that unless he didn't construct part of what he originally got approval for and the permit expired in 2 years. At that point, under that old ordinance.
Well, it depends on what's in the permit.
Yeah,
Right,
Right,
right.
so we gotta see the permits.
It is.
Next time we look at it, can we take a look at the permit?
Because, you know, you get more than if you get a substantial start, then that 2-year thing goes away.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I think it is important to see what the permit says, if it says equipment storage or whatever, and 10 years have gone by, and now they start excavating, I think that's, I'm not sure.
No, I get what I get the whole thing, but that's still, whatever was permitted before is still valid.
Yeah.
So we're not starting from ground zero, it's a commercial property to start with, so we're going into a change of use
Exactly, yeah, right.
Or an expansion.
or an
An
expansion.
expansion, right,
So that's all my point, that's all my point I was getting to.
yeah.
Right.
And I agree with you.
Yeah, and so, you know, I can't recall exactly what was on that original application. But I think getting a baseline, and knowing what is above and beyond it that has been done would be good to know. And I'm thinking Hans knows, I don't know. You know, Hans is in the enforcement arm of this town, so
And
that's.
what I saw was they had applied for 2 strip buildings, which were never put in. As far as equipment storage, you know, it was a vacant lot. I didn't ever conceive that a permit is needed for someone to store their equipment on their own property.
If
However,
it was
building the structures that were described in the permit was never done. And the scope of what they're doing appears to exceed the scope of what the permit was for.
Yeah, so. It's all. Even though you didn't need the permit, it's all in there, and they did use it for that, so that's a substantial start,
Okay,
is all I'm saying. So those 2 strip buildings would still be valid as far as I'm concerned. But what they were going for was far beyond that.
the owner acknowledged, he realizes he needs to come before the board.
Yeah,
He
so,
knew he was taking advantage.
Yep,
I just wanna make it clear that, that's still, in my eyes, it's still valid unless there's something that in the permit that. Because it was definitely a substantial start, trees were planted, he'd been using it, he just didn't do the buildings.
Okay.
So the earthwork and the establishment, and making the points and planting the trees out front. That's a, 30%, that's a substantial start.
Okay, so what's gonna happen is the applicant, your property owner today, he's gonna come into this board and bring an application and present it to us, right? Is that what's gonna happen?
that's,
Look like?
we can't speak for the applicant, right, but
That's the
I would
plan?
assume so,
Okay, so,
because his words were, he was taking advantage of having equipment on site with the ground frozen. So he knew he went too far, he knew he had to come before us, he's been in my office before.
oh, I thought you said, someone said maybe he's gonna come and
He will,
front of
in
this
the,
board and talk
before he
to
made
that.
the purchase, he came in and he asked questions about whether, the usage of it.
Oh, so he's considering to come forward to the board and make an application.
He knows he needs to.
Okay, so that's in consideration. So at that time, we can talk about it. What did you have? Before, what the permit prior owner had, and we can get into this whole discussion.
Okay.
Well, actually, I think that's all irrelevant
Yeah.
to, for the planning board. I mean, that's Han's business, not our business.
I was just giving you an.
Our business is to just look at that application and say yay or nay that it meets the ordinance.
Right.
If it's, you know, if the applicant does bring it forth.
Yeah, if you bring it
Correct.
forward, yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
And that's really what we're trying to get to, right? Is that it goes to Hans first. The planning board's role is to look at whatever comes to the planning board from an application that's considered complete. How does that line up against the ordinance? And then say, yay or nay. So,
What else is doing town?
I mean, this would not be the first time we've had an application for something that's different than what was originally approved on the same parcel of land. So, it's not new ground by any means.
It could be maybe an after the fact type of thing.
Yeah,
let us hope not.
with it.
Right, but you never know.
One never knows. Rich, you had a
I
hand
was
up.
gonna comment to Craig and stop me when I'm wrong or if I'm wrong. You had indicated that, and I agreed right up to the issue of they got a permit to use that property to bring in storing loam or crushed stone as trucks and stuff like that. That he certainly got a substantial start on that activity. He's been using it or was using it for years. Where I think you said that if he had a permit for 2 little strip commercial things, I would probably argue in my mind that if that's what he got a permit for, he doesn't have a substantial start because the construction of those 2 strip buildings would seem to me to be well more than 30% of put it this way, he hasn't expended 30% of the cost of constructing whatever, if he got a permit for that.
The way I would see it is if it's all one permit, then the start that he had would be 30% of the, I would think so. If there was separate permits for this and that, then you could break it down while he hasn't started the building.
But you think just excavating or leveling up that property is 30% of the cost of the end product?
I don't know, it'd probably be close, depends on if there were storage units, and those don't cost a lot.
Yeah.
If it's rocky, bony and all that, you know, could be.
Could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be something we'd have to kind of analyze
Forest out there, you know, trees down, bony.
to answer Richard's question that, you know, if and when that ever became an issue. Cause I kind of had the same question Rich did, you know, given that, not knowing, I mean, I wasn't on the board then, so I don't know what kinds of structures were proposed, but, you know, if it mini mall, that's one thing. If it's, you know, gonna be self-storage, like you said.
But if it was multiple uses, and he's been using it, then it's all one permit. So how can you take the permit away?
No, you're not taking the permit away. It's-
Well, that's what I'm saying, so it's still in place. Even though he didn't build the buildings, he got permitted for several different things, and he was using it for multiple years. So how can you take that away?
I don't,
Just because he didn't do
Right.
a portion of it.
I think the most important thing that we or Hans needs to do is dig out that application and that permit and see what.
See what it says.
We're kind of kicking around stuff we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't,
Correct.
I agree. It's not-
And my actions weren't based on permitting per se, but more of the erosion control and the type of earth moving that they were doing. Okay, they were bringing in fill and sand, putting it on top of the storm coming, and there was nothing in place.
Right. Yeah,
And that's what the final.
I saw that too.
So now they have some textbook perfect erosion control barrier,
That's excellent.
and that's what I was concerned with. This permit stuff, we can find them out another day, but
Right.
Yeah,
that's my update.
no, you're right about that.
Period.
John, so do you have any sense of what he actually wants to construct there, what he would propose to construct there?
It's not for me to say, he's gonna come here with his application and spell it out. I mean, he's talked about a couple things. But
It's all supposition until we have it on paper, right? So.
Hans, is this on here, because it's gonna be on the agenda next, meeting, or
what is it?
did we already deal with?
Whose name is that?
It's at Gauze or Ghosts or whatever, Golden Pond LLC.
How did that get there?
Is this your copy?
I don't have that. You have that?
No,
No, it might have been the bottom.
only the alternates get it.
Yeah, I know, really. The special people get that.
Yeah, this was underneath the bottom of the pile.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't talk to the public about this. Alternate.
Rich, any other comments?
No.
Thank you for handing this back. I was looking for all the. But yes, this will be on next meeting.
I was thinking you didn't fully deal with that yet. I thought maybe you had another item to the agenda tonight.
Nope, I think he's gonna be here with two next time around, so.
Hans, anything else?
Nothing.
No. Anything else from anybody?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, I'm on the ad hoc committee, the town. And,
That Public Works Advisory?
yeah, for the Public Works Advisory. And I'm on the subcommittee of land and buildings. So my question is, where's the municipality? And if we wanted to build a garage, a substantial garage, 40 by 60 or so. Do we need to abide by the 300 feet? Do we have 300 feet here? That's my question. So municipality, it's gonna be more traffic coming in and out of this town office than there is out of the town garage.
Run that one.
So if we used to buy a piece of property to build a municipal garage,
Right.
where we'd store 4 trucks, 5 trucks, and other equipment. Say it was on 27 or 11, would we need 300 feet of road frontage?
Oh, 300 feet of road frontage.
Because
That-
this town office had 300 feet of road frontage.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, it would have to comply with the minimum lot size ordinance. Just like it would have to comply with, if it's a brand new site,
Yeah,
it would have to comply with, we'd have to get a permit under the commercial development review
Correct.
ordinance. Just like the sand salt shed.
Correct.
does that have 300 feet on the road?
I don't know. I would have to think it does. I can't remember. I remember when we went through it.
That, you know what, that was an after fact application to town.
So we'd have to go through a commercial development review for municipal,
Yeah,
not commercial.
Yep.
It's not commercial. It's
no,
just
but it's
municipal.
It's not
non-residential.
residential.
So we'd have to abide by that ordinance,
Correct.
300, so we'd have to buy at least 300 feet on the road.
If that's what the ordinance says, like,
Yeah, I don't know, I mean. Yeah, I don't know, I'd have to look it up, but if whatever it is in the ordinance, yeah.
Well, any commercial entity needs 300 feet on the road frontage, doesn't it?
I'm not, I honestly don't know off the top of my head, I'll look it up.
I was thinking 200, but I could very well be wrong. You know, I can't remember.
What color is that one?
It's green.
But yeah, another question.
No, commercials.
I mean, it certainly would have to comply with, you know, those standards in the ordinance that deal with, you know, line of sight, all that kind of stuff, you know,
Right.
and
Well, yeah, well, then the
DOT
commercial
road entrance permit.
review order.
da-da-da-da.
You want to know the 300 feet or not,
I'd be surprised if DOT would require a
let's see.
turning lane, though, because of the lack of traffic, unlike say retail.
That was gonna be my next question, is if it was on 27 or something. Do you think DOT would, or who's the contact for the DOT, or do you even know that? I could contact to ask that question, because the lack of,
They have a group of people that deal with these things,
I
and
don't know.
you have to ask that group.
one's already being used as commercial property, and they don't have a turn. You know, one of the potential sites.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, here, like you said, I mean, here they didn't require a turning lane.
But it's 40 miles an hour here.
Right, the speed limit, it doesn't matter, yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly don't entirely understand how they determine that, I really don't, so. One thing, Craig, go ahead, you know.
I just, the road commissioner, have a contact with DOT.
Probably all have to ask.
Yes.
One thing, just, in that sort of same lane, vein, if you start off with a virgin piece of property and you develop more than 3 acres of it in buildings, you know, cleared yard, developed yard, that kind of thing. You want to stay under 3 acres, otherwise you trigger the site location development law, the state site location development law.
So that's with the clear buildings and clear lot, because what if we went with a combination of fire department, exit, municipal garage?
Doesn't matter.
Right, so, but 3 acres of parking lot and building,
Yeah,
that could be on like a 5 or 6 acre lot, 9 acre lot.
yeah.
Uh,
I say that because it'll take a lot of time.
Yep.
so stay under
It'll take
3
6
acres.
months at least.
250 feet inside the zone, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
So that would really screw up the timeline.
Well, this is all just a study anyway.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just
It's kind of-
thought I should mention that.
it's good to know where there are some constraints,
Stay under 3 acres.
because whatever would trigger the site law, not that there's anything wrong with the site law, I'm not saying that at all, it's just that if
It's time,
it's a time thing, right? Yeah.
time, engineering, planning.
Yeah, Peter, in the commercial ordinance here, if you go to the no page, but you go into Article 6, development standards generally. And you got section 1 is air quality, section 2 is access to public streets. And that goes on for a page and a half. It goes on to another page, where you got 2.5 pages. And it's that's kind of talking about what parts of town you're talking about, you know, the village or some other area. So it's pretty voluminous, you know,
That
but
is,
that's where it is in here, I think,
thank you.
to answer your question.
The minimum lot size ordinance says 200 feet for road frontage.
So that's the 200, okay,
60,000 square feet for lot size. And you have to have a boundary line form factor within which a 90-foot radius circle can be inscribed. So I guess you've got to have, the lot's got to be big enough where you can have 180 feet in there, the circle that's radius of 90 feet, but it is 200 feet in that way.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because I don't see anything in the section that Pete mentioned about
road shows.
road frontage. There is site, you know, sight lines based on,
300 stuck in my-
well, there's a minimum 350, not a minimum, but if there's no speed limit on a particular road, it's a minimum of 350 feet of site distance outside of a village. area. But, you know, Belgrade, that more than likely means you're at least in a 45-mile-an-hour speed. But anyways,
I thought the speed limit in town was 60 miles an hour. You know why?
oh,
He's being a-
well, maybe that's how you drive, but we don't need to go there, but we're still on the public record, so don't say anything, Pete.
Admit nothing. Does that help answer some questions, Craig?
Yep.
A little bit?
You know, the other thing, and I realize, you know, this is just kind of the feasibility aspect of it, but, you know, when people start maybe thinking about specific sites, again, a virgin site, if it's gonna entail fuel storage, sort of like what DOT has, so larger above ground or undergrounds, just remember, you gotta keep it away from people's wells.
That too is another excellent point.
Because otherwise, then you may have to apply to DEP for a variance, and
Right.
that also takes time and money.
Yeah. Yeah, so on that point, I want to make sure that if anything ever happens where an application goes to Hines to look for completeness, to have that conversation about proximity to wells. Because, yeah. It's a good thing to do.
Well, I commend you for being on that committee.
Yeah.
It's no small amount of work.
Thanks for being on that, Greg. Yeah, it'd be helpful. It would be really helpful to have you on that, you know.
Oh, I just found something on, public and institutional facilities, spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. And it refers to elementary school, right, then secondary school, community center, municipal office. And
Was it about parking spaces that have to be allocated? Is that what we're?
I'm talking about number of parking spaces. Okay, yeah, right. Under that. Yeah. Yeah.
The team will have to work that out, right? So it would be.
Still a lot of work.
Your committee, though, isn't actually actively looking at for sites,
Well,
or is it?
we're trying to accumulate potential sites and get a
Okay,
number on
okay.
them. And there's been a couple,
Is the DOT site still in play, or?
no. Well, I say that, they wanted to, now they're saying they want to keep it. We asked, Lorna asked if we could lease it or rent it. So, I don't know, so it's what she's supposed to be doing is going above the person that she's talking
Oh,
to.
okay, yeah.
And go up to, the commissioner and, or towards that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew the town had kind of been jerked around for a long time.
It's felt like, this is just me, like the promise of that particular DOT site has been a bit of a carrot or a tease of it. Like, hey, we'll do this, and then it seems to stall, and then there's like, it ignites again, and then it stalls again. So to me, that's the way it's felt. I'm not
Exactly
saying,
right. And dangling it for 27 and Route 11 being winter maintenance, and that's not gonna happen.
Oh, I see.
you don't know.
Scratch my back.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe I'll scratch yours.
If you're-
Maybe, yeah.
All right,
The fire department hasn't found a site yet either, have they?
No, but one of the sites is potentially close enough to the depot that we can put both.
okay.
That would make sense.
That would be
Yeah.
nice to have that facility. But I don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Yeah, yeah.
But, all right, is there anything else we need to talk about? So before,
Just adjourning.
yeah, so before we adjourn, I just wanted to thank you all for your continued work on this planning board. It's been a real pleasure to work with all of you on this. I really appreciate it, even though sometimes we may disagree on some details, the fact that we get to an end result is important, so thank you very much for that, and whether or not I go to a select person role is immaterial. I just want to make sure I tell you all that now. It's important to me to share that. with
Nice of you to say so.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So with that said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn for the evening.
In a second, I second it. Any more discussion? So all those in favor, so Rich,
Yes.
Pete, George,
Yes.
Craig, me too, all in favor, we're adjourned.
I think I should get a vote too.
Yeah.